So, a couple more questions?
Yeah, okay.
And tell me if I ask too many.
No, that's what we're here for.
That's my job.
So how did you, like, pick this area, the Klamath, just because it's kind of in the spotlight? And do you have an example of a place you've done in Northern California, like a restoration project?
Yes. So how did we pick the area? Well, we had a request from a sponsor. We had an existing congressional authorization. And Mike, do you want to add anything?
Well, we started talking with them all the way back in 2017 for basically next phase of restoration in there. We sent them letters about once a year or so for a lot of years, and finally we got a response that, like, yes, we're ready to do the study. Like I said, you know, it's a sponsor Army Corps partnership. We're expected to carry the whole financing of our participation in the study, and we are. And so it's just really important to understand that this is a feasibility study. Like, we don't have a project footprint or anything. Like, we're just trying to come in and say, like, okay, what's possible? All right, well, we got a little bit after, probably get some stragglers coming in. Hope I'm projecting well enough for the video here and all you guys to hear me. My name is Michael Belchick. I work for the Yurok tribe. I'm a water policy analyst, although in this capacity here, I'm more like an outreach or coordinator. And I want to explain what we're here for and what we're doing and what we're not doing, and just have a conversation. So what we're doing is a general investigation, which is a restoration feasibility study with the Army Corps of Engineers. The way these studies work is it's a non-federal sponsor, and then the Army Corps comes in. The Yurok tribe here is a non-federal sponsor. We are not getting paid. We are not the recipients of a grant. The Yurok tribe is contributing its services in kind here. So just want to make that clear. This is a 3-year feasibility study. We don't have a project footprint. We don't have projects outlined. All we have is a generalized geographic area, which consists of the upper main stem Klamath to the state line, but probably won't include anything about Iron Gate Canyon, and the Shasta and Scott as a whole. We'll be focusing on aquatic ecosystem function as a part of the restoration, with the hopes that this provides stability for the agricultural community as well as fisheries restoration. That's what our goal is. We are at the very beginning, the abject beginning. We have not put any draft together. We don't have a project footprint. And we know that people like Sharna and Betsy and landowners and people have been working very hard on different projects. And so we know that we're coming into this with a lot already done. Our intent is not to replace anything that's been done. Our intent is to further it and possibly provide funding in the long term of the magnitude that can really be used to address some of these. Furthermore, no project will take place on anybody's land without their express written consent. That's just an absolute hardcore requirement of this project here. The Army Corps here has a restoration, and they're going to be talking to it, has a restoration mandate. At the end of this feasibility study, there could be recommendations for projects if the community and landowners are willing to entertain that, and then any funding that's acquired for this has to be congressionally approved. So there's another step to do and another check and balance there. So what I want to do, before that, I want to talk about opportunity for input here too. We have several ways for input. This is a public meeting. You can provide verbal comment here. We have written cards there. There's also an email that we'll provide. But we're also, certain parties here, Watershed Council, for example, have a lot of acquired technical information and expertise. There are sovereign nations here, Quartz Valley. Chairman Bennett is here, I want to acknowledge that. So there's we're willing to meet with people, including landowners, anybody, one-on-one, to express concerns or ideas or data or whatever people want to do here. And so it's our hope that at the end of this, the feasibility study is 3 years. If things are feasible. We have project footprints. Then there's a design phase that probably lasts several more years. Then there's a going to Congress. But the payoff could be enormous. Army Corps of Engineers funds projects in the $50 to $150 million range for ecosystem restoration, with all the caveats that I had before. And it's years down the line. It's not tomorrow. So we're not coming saying, what do you think? Right now we don't have a footprint. We're asking for people to come up with input and ideas right now. So with that, I wanted to turn this over to the Army Corps so they can introduce themselves. We have only been working with them a couple years ourselves, so we're all still getting to know each other, and I think this is an introduction chance for you to meet them and understand what they're doing.
Hey, Mike, can I just make sure I'm going down the right path? So these potential projects, is that something that Yorks would be doing here, the Watershed Council, or?
The actual implementation, so
Yeah.
what they manage the construction, but you guys can hire outside contractors to do the work. Our intention is that no design goes forward without extensive input and review from the people who know the land here. And so that's landowners, local residents, and Watershed Council and other groups like that. We're not intending to come in with projects and just say, here, what do you think? The intent is to develop these together.
Thank you.
But before I get started, hi everyone, my name is Lexi Karen. I'm an environmental manager with the Army Corps of Engineers at the San Francisco District, but for this study I am assisting in outreach with my counterpart Dylan from the Yurok tribe, and then I'm also one of the environmental co-leads, so I'll be supporting the study in an environmental compliance way. So the structure of this meeting, it's a typical public meeting, so we just went over introductions. I'll pass it to my Army Corps colleagues as they speak and present to introduce themselves. But we're just going to briefly talk about the study, where we're at right now and where we plan to be going, and also how to get involved. And then after our quick little introduction, we'll open it up for questions and answers and hopefully have a really good discussion about the study and opportunities for restoration. So the purpose of today's meeting is to share information about the Klamath Basin Study, where we're at, and where we plan to go, but we can't do that without receiving input from you all. So we really want to learn what restoration opportunities are important to you. What do you know? And we also want to know what projects are coming down the pipeline that you are involved in, that you know about, just so we can make sure that we're synergistic with that, we're not stepping on toes, and that we're working collaboratively with you. Because we can't do this without the landowners, the tribes, the agencies, the organizations that live and work in this area. And so we also want to encourage new participation and collaboration. So this might be the first time that you see my face, but it will not be the last. And so as Mike mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities. We'll get into it a little bit more later on how to stay involved in different ways where we can meet with you either here, online, in any capacity that works for you. And so just a little bit more about the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for those who may not be familiar with our larger mission. And so the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is a federal agency that sits under the Department of Defense. We have over 40 offices across the country. We have offices internationally. But the San Francisco District is located in downtown San Francisco, but our area of responsibility, so the places we oversee and manage, extend all the way north up to the Klamath Basin, all the way south to the Salinas River, and we hug the shoreline, including the entire Bay Area. And so our office is made up of around 250 people. We have planners, biologists, archaeologists, cultural resources, travel liaisons, hydrologists. We have an entire plethora of experiences and expertise. Even though there's only 3 of us from the Corps here, our entire project team, we have economists, we have people who specialize in real estate, we have a very large team sitting back in San Francisco. And so some of the main missions of the Army Corps of Engineers, we plan, design, and construct water resource projects. So that's why we're here today. But we also permit construction along waterways and wetlands, and you may be familiar with our regulatory component of our agency. But we also operate and maintain water supply and recreational facilities. So the San Francisco District oversees Lake Mendocino, Lake Sonoma, a little bit south of here. We also support state emergency management and response activities. So we have a lot of colleagues right now down in LA helping out with the wildfire recovery. We have colleagues on the East Coast helping out with recovery from Hurricane Helene. And as Mike mentioned earlier, everything that we do is congressionally authorized and appropriated. So we need permission from Congress written into law and funding from them before we can pretty much do anything. And I will pass it over to Corey.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Corey Stetzel and I'm a water resources planner and I'm actually with the Sacramento District. And I also, before I dive into my slides, I want to introduce Serafina Maraschino, who is our tribal liaison.
Hello.
Yes. Okay, so a lot of people are surprised to learn that the Army Corps has an aquatic ecosystem restoration mission, so I just want to give you a high-level overview of what that is. And we kind of use a lot of different terminology. You'll hear us say feasibility study, general investigation, restoration study. It all means the same thing. And so what is our ecosystem restoration study? It's an investigation of the problems in the watershed. And it's more like a survey or a review of the existing problems in the watershed. We're not going out and collecting data, we're not sampling water quality, we're just looking to see what problems are already out there. And the problems, they're water resources problems. They have to be associated with a river channel, a riparian, floodplain, or wetland area. So we can't do any work in the uplands. Our study also serves as a decision-making framework to incorporate public feedback, tribal feedback, and also serves as a framework to select a restoration plan, which will ultimately get submitted to Congress for federal funding and permission to construct. All of our feasibility studies are initiated at the request of a local sponsor, and in this case, our sponsor is the Yurok tribe, and they are cost-sharing this study with us 50-50. So diving into the mechanics of the feasibility study just a little bit more. Yeah, it is a little hard to see on the screen at the moment, but we are in the very beginning, in that first blue box on the far right. We are trying to understand the current conditions in the upper mid-Klamath, the Scott River, and the Shasta River watersheds. We're trying to understand the water resources problems that persist and should be addressed, and other opportunities for restoration as well. So we plan to compile a list of the existing problems and also the potential solutions to address those problems. And that list will develop into our initial array of alternatives.
This is the eye test here. You guys see that?
No.
I think the last two you need to read off your computer screen.
Okay.
Probably all four.
Can't read any of them.
Can't read any of it.
First one says understand current conditions, problems, and opportunities. Second one says develop potential solution measures, alternates. The third one says
It's on environmental, social, and economic benefits and community input. And so before I move to the fourth, I want to say, since this is an aquatic ecosystem restoration study, we're really focusing primarily on those environmental benefits, and we're looking to maximize aquatic habitat. That's one of our primary metrics in our feasibility study, but we're also interested in other ecosystem goods and services that might benefit the community, right? Like groundwater recharge or recreation, what have you, other things that might benefit the community as well. And we're also going to consider the community's preference, right? That's going to be an important piece of what plan we ultimately select to recommend to Congress. And so the fourth box on the far right says, select final solutions and write final plan for approval by Congress. So that the final product at the end of the study is a report that our chief of engineers signs and submits to Congress. And then it's up to Congress at that point to authorize and appropriate before we can move on.
Can we ask questions?
Sure.
You want to wait till the end?
I'll take a question, yeah.
So I'm just, around here sometimes it's hard to find a place to do restoration. So is one of the tools you have, say, buying land from a willing landowner to do the restoration on?
So the Army Corps, requires that any restoration plan that we implement should exist in perpetuity, so we would either have to buy the land or get a conservation easement on the land. Yes. And Mike said this earlier, landowner participation is completely voluntary. No one will be forced to participate in any way, shape, or form.
Would there be
So there's funds
would there be
to,
compensation for the conservation easement?
Yes.
and funds for those activities are included?
For the restoration activities,
Yeah.
yes.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't you kind of like take a poll of the people that might want to take advantage of a conservation easement before you do study? Because you could be studying a bunch of ground that you can't do anything with and wasting a bunch of time.
It's a great point, and that's the problem we deal with. Yeah, like, how do we know who's willing and who's not?
Yeah, 'cause I
Absolutely.
think that's going to be a tough one.
I think it's going to be tough too. Yeah.
And I don't want to see government
Yeah.
money wasted any more than the next time.
No, nobody does. I think, Rick, you run into a chicken and egg problem, because if I come to someone without anything and say, you want to do conservation, they're like, depends, what do you got in mind?
Right.
See, you do run into kind of a chicken and egg.
No, I get that. I mean, there's a balance, but it,
Yeah, I hear you.
yeah, I know you.
Yeah.
There's not a third option. It's outright purchase or conservation easement.
Yes.
And how is that valuation done?
We have a real estate specialist that does that, and I'm sorry they're not here to give you more detail on that.
Huh.
Uh-huh.
You mean about the value of a conservation easement? Is that the question?
It has the valuation of a land purchase or a conservation
Yeah.
easement done. I don't know that, I can pretend to know the
Community input,
details.
I work for a land trust board, so typically it's based on an appraisal, and the appraisal has to determine what the conservation value of the land is, and then difference between the land with that conservation easement on it or the land without the conservation easement on it. So if it's a purchased conservation easement, then it's valued with that appraised value. Or if it's a buyout of the land, it's also an appraised value, and there's a standard method for doing those appraisals that government agencies and generally land trusts have to follow.
And if you hold a conservation easement, you can sell it, right?
Well,
Or can you make that a condition that you give
you
the landowner first
You can
option?
sell the land, and the conservation easement stays with the land
Yeah.
through the ownership.
But the holder of the easement, I understood it was a split title, and you're holding a portion of the title just like the landowner's holding a title, and you can sell your portion of the title just like anybody else.
Well, so there's a lot of different options, Rick. There's different kinds of conservation easements. Some are tied to the deed, some are split title. There's lots of
Okay.
different options on there.
That's just my
I think the
concern,
gist here,
is that there's some option like that.
Yeah, the
Okay.
gist here is that the Army Corps wants permanency to the project. They don't want someone to sell the land and take the project out if a lot of
Oh,
money
yeah,
is being spent.
I'm
That's
a
the gist.
taxpayer, I don't want to.
Right. The other gist is that it's not happening if the landowner doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, no, I get
So
that.
if the compensation, they don't believe it's fair, they don't want to do it, they don't want to participate, then it's not happening.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to figure out ahead of time what kind of obstacles there may be and,
Yeah.
you know, and just things that you need to look at, because that is one thing, the fear of the holder, the land trust holding the conservation easement, their ability to trade it like to the federal government or to the state, something like that, which is kind of what happened with the Nature Conservancy, and we ended up on. And so, like, with that kind of potential, you guys should probably head that one off at the pass to whatever degree you can. 'Cause
Okay.
that's a tough one.
And who, my follow-up question on that is the conservation, but if you did a fee title, who would be the owner?
That's right. It would have to be a local sponsor, a non-federal sponsor. The federal government would not own the lands. So we are partnering with the Europe tribe right now on the feasibility study. We could continue to partner with them, or we could partner with somebody else during the design and construction phase.
Thank you.
And when you talk about like how did the area get picked, basically we talked about what the highest priority, what the restoration potential, and what impact we could make, and came up with like the Shasta, the Scott, Upper Main-Stem Klamath. There's plenty of other areas that are important, like the Salmon River, for example, Springer Stronghold, and all the tributaries on the Yurok Reservation. Those are also important. And we decided to focus up here because of the potential, the coho, and what is possible here. It also seemed like there is a lot of momentum moving towards restoration up here, and we felt like that we could build on that. Like, there's a lot of planning coming or being done right now. I know, Sharna, you're deep into the strap, and we thought that, like, with the longer planning horizon here, we could take this planning and like have a chance of making it real with some real funding. That's what we were thinking. And you asked for an example.
Yeah, just wanted to know if you have any.
There's a couple feasibility studies.
The one I'm most familiar with is the Yuba River Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study. That ended up in a recommendation for $100 million of river restoration
Wow.
near the gold fields of the Yuba River. We were successful. We were authorized by Congress, ready to start our design process, but then our sponsor backed out. So we're without a sponsor on that project at the moment and looking for a sponsor to participate in the design and construction phase. Yes.
Who can be a sponsor?
It's a great question. Yes, have a great. I mean, normally we're dealing with government agencies, but I think there can be a wide variety. Do you have some input?
Basically, it falls down to ability to contract, but generally we work with NGOs as well as counties, cities contract. And it's an easy question to ask. I mean, basically, we get a letter of interest, starts the ball rolling for us.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Also, difficult to read. This is the bigger picture phases of how a project would get built.
Turn the lights
And-
on for a second.
Out of the way.
Yeah, go ahead, turn the lights on for a second. So we're at the very beginning. We are in the feasibility study phase.
It's almost readable now.
Almost readable, yeah. Oh, well, yeah, so we're in the feasibility study phase, at the beginning of the feasibility study phase. And there is a law that requires us to complete a feasibility study within 3 years. We can request exceptions to that, but we're going to try to make that 3-year feasibility study at this point. And at the end of the feasibility study, we go back to Congress, we ask them for authorization to construct and appropriation funding. They say yes, we move into the pre-construction engineering and design phase. And that's where we take our 30% drawings, our class 3 cost estimates, all the way to 100% construction drawings and class 1 cost estimates. Sometimes we have to go back to Congress a second time. It depends. It depends on how Congress is feeling, whether they give us full approval the first time we ask. But then we move into the construction phase. And after the construction is complete, we do have that monitoring and adaptive management phase to make sure the project is functioning as we planned it to function. And once we determine that it is performing adequately, we, in a sense, turn over the keys to our non-federal sponsor at that point, and they operate it and maintain it into perpetuity.
Do you guys actually do the designs?
Yes, usually, but we also can collaborate on designs. Absolutely. And I think there's a good chance we will be collaborating on designs in this instance.
I have a broad question. So,
Yep.
It has been mentioned, there's a lot of effort and history in
Yes.
the 3 geographic areas you mentioned, the Upper Mid-Klamath, Scott, and Shasta. That's sort of the geographic realm we're working with, right?
Correct. Yep.
So what need is being met by using this process right now that isn't being met already?
Money.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to understand better. I think that our partner has a better sense of, you know, where the impairment still exists in these watersheds.
I think, you know, in a broad sense, we are trying to bring significant funding resources to people that wanted it, right? And if people feel like all the needs are being met and they don't need anything else, then we're not needed. You know, we'll pack our bags, you know. That's what we want to do, is fulfill funding needs of people that aren't being met by current funding sources.
And so then a follow-up to that is who decides, what's the process and who will decide, and maybe you're going to cover that, what projects move forward? Is it the community, is it consensus, is it another working group that gets formed? How will that happen?
It's a little, well, we are required by law and policy to identify that plan that maximizes habitat with a reasonable cost. So we can't forget about the cost piece. But we also we don't have to recommend that plan to Congress. We usually recommend the plan to Congress, the maximized habitat plan, but if there's a good rationale for recommending a different plan, we can do that. And we can do that through those other benefit categories like social benefits, economic benefits, or maybe it's a risk factor like, oh man, this one particular plan would give us a lot of habitat, but it's risky. So we better not put our money there. We should put our money elsewhere. Those are the types of things that we think about internally when we're selecting a plan.
So there's some thresholds that need to be met, and shotgun approach may not be appropriate. I mean, that's the kind of thing that the Army Corps will be evaluating when the proposals come through.
I don't know what you mean by shotgun approach.
Well, does it have to, an individual landowner could be an adequate project on 30 acres.
I think what their idea with this feasibility is to come up with a project with a capital P, right? That
That's what I'm
consists of
getting at, is
many smaller
For folks
projects.
to understand the scope of
I see.
what
Yeah.
would be considered suitable.
So like an alternative can be one distinct project area, or it can be multiple different project areas that may have some relationship or a certain theme. So the alternative can vary in the scale.
So I mean, the direct answer to what you're asking is there's certain filters that Army Corps will provide. They'll be like, no, that one's too expensive, or that. Then there's also community buy-in and fitting in with existing plans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think, you know, what we don't want to do is come up with a list of projects and everyone just boo it out of town. What we're looking for is we come up with a list and everybody looks at it and goes, okay, yeah, that's something we can, that works, fits through their filters, and then it's submitted. That's the ultimate goal. It ain't easy to get there, I recognize that, but that's what we're looking for.
So those assessment thresholds and methods aren't outlined yet? Are they
Well, we
within your
have some-
authorization, or do
I
you
guess-
developed on the fly?
I mean, maybe this will answer your question. We have to model each alternative and the impacts of each alternative. So we'll do hydrologic and then hydraulic modeling, take those inputs and feed it into an ecological model.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
there we go.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay, and so then we'll compare the outputs of all the different ecological models, and that's how we see which one is maximizing habitat.
So, well, go ahead, Sharon.
Go ahead, Mom.
Um,
You done? Oh,
You alluded to the Watershed Council work, but we're well down the road to doing those exact things.
Okay.
And of course, the opportunity for resources is always appealing. There's lots and lots of important work to do here, but there's a group of us here that have been working closely together, and the idea is that we have local governance over the process, and very much around our local tribal entity here and all the other local residents. And I think it's uncomfortable to me, I'll use the me word here, to have the idea that this external process is coming. Is it competing? Is it aligned? How does the governance work who makes the decisions. You know, we're the local partner,
Yeah.
us. We're the local partner here. So how does that work?
I'm going to build on what you're saying, Betsy, is that Thomas Harder from UC Davis, Laura Foglia from Larry Walker Associates, we have a very mature, very vetted, trusted hydrologic model for the Scott River. Is your intent to come in and rebuild something that's had like 2 decades of community buy-in, and then the project that Betsy's alluding to is that we are working on a hydraulic model that we will be coupling these two tools so that we can better understand if we do A, this is what, you know, on the surface, this will happen in the groundwater basin. Would your project in the Scott duplicate that?
So, not necessarily. There is an avenue for us to approve outside models for use in our study. We do have a list of pre-certified models that we're comfortable with, that we have reviewers, that the chief of engineer knows and that we're comfortable with, but we can make an approval of an outside model for use. And when we do that fairly frequently, actually.
Because the Scott has, you know, a more defined model. Gary can probably talk to the Shasta, but the Shasta Valley is doing something similar. It's not as far along, but it is underway. That duplicating, and Rick, your comment about as a taxpayer not having, you know, another, and not from a taxpayer's, but just also having competing science is never a good thing for anybody, because then we all of a sudden, you know, I mean, no models are going to model exactly the same, and then it's going to cause community confusion, and
Well, I don't think that's our intent, Sharna. You know, I've said all along that we want to add to what you guys have been doing, not replace or duplicate or come and take over or anything like that. So what I'm assuming, you know, what we want to try to do is bring the resources to turn the actionable projects that you've identified into reality. And I assume when we do that, you're going to be a major part of it. We can't do it without you guys, you know, we can't. So how that looks, how this process melds in with what they're, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not coming to you with an, I'm like, what do you guys want? How do you want to do this? You know, or if it just doesn't work, then just tell us to get out of town, you know. But I hope that's not the answer, because I think we can bring resources to bear to make things happen, you know. And so I looked at the timelines here and saw that they looked pretty far out. Like I don't think we're hurting. The only thing, like the feasibility study is a 3-year study. And I don't know what that means for you yet, right? But the funding and the actual doing is pretty far out. So it didn't feel like we were rushing or shoehorning or anything. We're just trying to like see how this works. I get this can be difficult. I get that you guys have done a shit ton of work and you've really put your hearts into it and you know what you're doing.
Our basin has done it.
Yeah.
Right.
Our basin has done it.
Maybe like you all, you know. And so we're trying to figure out how this can fit together. Will it fit together? What works for you guys?
So when you came, did you already have a list of things already in motion? Projects that are already here? So that probably was a good idea.
Well, but what we have looked at what everything, so we're not starting from zero, right? We have a list of all the different plans that we've been looking at and everything. So we're not just sitting there unaware and saying, oh, we're starting from zero, like newborn babies or something, you know. We have been looking at what's been going on. But the next step is going, okay, so what works for you guys? Like, how could we add value here? Or is it just too disruptive or what? You know, like, I don't know. I don't come to you with an answer of exactly how this would, but I feel like it has potential.
Yeah, I feel there are avenues for various levels of participation as well, right? Like maybe you would be interested in signing on as a co-sponsor, or maybe that's too much and you just want to be on an advisory committee, or you know, we can come up with something that feels right and works for whoever wants to be involved.
How many more meetings like this will there be? Because I don't see a a ton of people, like as far as landowners and whatever, be like, hey, I've got a place along the Scott River that looks like crap. There's a ton of tailings. There's a whole mile here that could be, redone, but I don't see that happening. So this is a good start.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of people maybe didn't know about it, but I think that's where you're probably gonna have to go to get those ideas. They already
You
have
want
the
more
project
meetings?
started. No, but I didn't know about this until this morning.
Okay,
So
well, we just view this as a beginning, and so, we come in, we say, look, this is what our ideas are, I think people are gonna talk about it. What I said earlier, I meant, like, we're willing to meet with anybody that wants to meet and talk about it in depth, whether it's virtual. I think there's gonna be, I'm gonna be like living up here this summer just about, so. But, that's, yeah,
I'll say we haven't even fully scoped our study, so we haven't decided if we're going to do 5, 10, 15 meetings. We're still making those decisions right now.
So the
But I'm hearing we need more meetings.
the 3 years, you're going to look at all these 3 areas simultaneously, and at the end of 3 years, you will then have honed in on something that you feel you can take to that construction level
Yeah.
phase in that timeline that you shared.
A couple things on that, right? So if we do need more extended time for outreach, maybe we need more than 3 years. That's a possibility. And also, we are thinking about how we can be more efficient. Can we screen something out sooner rather than later so we can focus on what's going to be the biggest benefit for the community? So we will have to be making some difficult decisions.
So some of those areas may fall out.
Some of the areas may fall out. Yes.
Well, I gotta say, funding's always an important thing.
Yes. Yes.
Good point.
Uh-huh.
But the money will be used for easement or property purchase.
And the actual,
Project.
measures, actions,
Yeah.
changes to the river or what have you.
That's fundamental.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys are probably too young, but I started in this thing in 99, and with the critical habitat designation at Coho Center. And I did it as an amateur for a while, and then I worked for the Board of Supervisors for 8 years handling their natural resource policy issues. And during that time, I met Mike and the Yurok tribe and had a lot of interactions with them. And, we were on opposite sides and had some pretty good go-rounds. And, but I respect the Yuroks and the way they dealt with everybody and were straight up. And so I've been pitching Mike and the Yurok tribe around here, but they're, the jungle drums rumble around here, and nothing ever goes really smooth. And I think it's, incumbent. I've had plenty of conversations with Mike and the executive director, Troy Fletcher, when he was alive, and Dave Hillmeyer, the fisheries guys. So I respect their opinions and trust and honesty and integrity. But, there's been some problems here, so I'd like at least perceptions of problems. So if, Mike can speak to that, I would appreciate, so like people can hear it from the horse's mouth, and in this group anyway, and then to what degree it's online. But the other thing is Army Corps has been here before.
Right.
Yeah, when we were, with that critical habitat issue. No, not in 1930 or whenever they sprayed the river. This was in 99. But it was some guy came over from Humboldt, and he was confused about what waters of the U.S. are, and he was here for regulatory problems. So I can't say I'm really thrilled about you guys being back, because I was there for some pretty funky encounters with you guys.
Okay.
And so I'd like you to address what the regulatory issues that may crop up or that you see, or your regulatory authority here? Because, you know, I can't say you guys are gonna be very welcome.
Okay.
So, you know, the intentions, they're perfectly good and glad to have good stuff. But things go sideways with federal agencies, state agencies, and next thing, somebody lets you on their property, and the next thing, somebody drops a dime, and there's big trouble. So if you could address what regulatory aspects may accompany your work here, I think that'd be good.
I wasn't sure about the first part of the question, but about the regulatory aspects. So like any restoration project, there's going to be environmental compliance, NEPA will have to be done for that, and some sort of Endangered Species Act permits required. Generally for restoration projects, theoretically goes smoother, but in practice, you know, these people here aren't regulatory people.
No, I know that.
This is the ecosystem restoration branch,
I get
so they
that.
don't have regulatory authority.
Yeah.
That would be someone else that Bob Moore deals with, right? There's a different Army Corps that does 404 permitting and stuff. That's generally their regulatory authorities, 404 dredge and fill permits. So these folks don't have any regulatory authority.
No, I realize that, but it is the Army Corps, and everybody's reporting to everybody else, and one thing and another, and you know, the problem with them last time is that, you know, just every little hitch and get along that they thought that might be affecting the waters of the U.S. was a problem for this guy, and until we had a discussion on what actually at that time constituted waters of the U.S., you know, there was some funky confrontation. So I really don't want to get into that again. To whatever degree there's a bunch of communication here causing a good project to go sideways.
Okay, we haven't discussed anything like that, so
I don't
can say
imagine.
that.
I mean, you probably didn't even know the Corps was running around here.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, it was a draft.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's, you know, and that's the trouble. You know, a small community, things like that get around, they get blown out of proportion. You know, and so I think, you know, that interface between what you're doing and your regulatory arm and responsibilities, need to have somebody talk about that at some point.
I think that's a wonderful suggestion, and something that's worth thinking about is the waters of the what we know as the waters of the U.S. rule, or WOTUS. That has changed a lot since '99. In fact, we have just recently received new guidance.
I bet you did.
And second decision and all the rest of the stuff. So the regulatory rhythm, if you will, is radically different than what we do on the other side. I actually work with regulatory law. I'm tribal liaison, so if there's a tribal component to all of that, I'm going to get involved. But for the most part, the regulatory mission, the rhythm, if you will, is always working with the applicant. The applicant needs the permit to build the project, and so that's what drives the timelines. This is obviously something different, but I think I would like to know more about specifically which project you're talking about. And
Well, it wasn't a project. It was when they were developing critical habitat, and for some reason they consulted the Corps. You know, I think it was NOAA Fisheries was doing was the lead on critical habitat designation, and at that time they were talking 300 feet on either side of every creek and gully running to the Pacific. So, you know, it was pretty expansive. So they were, you know, waters of the U.S., some little dry gulch was a little much of a stretch.
Well, there's a story about somebody who was trying to take a canoe or a kayak through the LA River to prove that it was navigable. So it's.
But Rick, I think what their answer was like, the WOTUS description has changed quite a bit. This is a different branch. I just don't. I don't know what to do about, like, to change people's mind about that if they have a bad taste about the Army Corps. But
well, no,
we've seen this before. We've seen this before. You know, literally working with tribes, for example, and then being told, you know, like, oh, you guys were just here last week. I said, we were.
Yeah.
Because our missions are.
I know how government works. The left hand don't know what the right's doing lots of times, and so I just assume keep it that way. As far as the regulatory guys.
Yeah. And I can just add that within these 3 years of our feasibility study, we will be working with NOAA, NIMS, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, Regional Water Quality Control Board to get all of the permits and all of the compliance that we need for this study done. So everything that we do, we're going to be handling ourselves. And we're going to be working really closely with those agencies. We've already met with almost all of them at this point to talk about the study, to just let them know that, hey, we're here, we're gonna be working with you guys for the next couple of years, and we really want to make sure that this is a streamlined process that results in something that can actually break ground. So.
But that's gonna be narrowly focused on actionable project areas.
Yeah.
It's not a broad scope, you know.
You want to expand on, like what you've seen with your work so far here and your experiences and, perhaps maybe how it hasn't gone all that smoothly to where people aren't real happy with the tribes on some of the things. I don't know for sure, but when these things circle around,
I don't know what exactly people are saying. I know we made some mistakes early, and we owned up to it.
Okay.
And we've been focused on
That's
getting
what
the
I'm
project
getting
done.
I try, and I think it's better when it comes from you to everybody, and rather than abandon it to rumors and gossip and jungle drums. And
That's
like
what
I
Scott
said, I
Valley
work with-
likes, though.
What's that?
That's what Scott Valley likes, though.
I know, but if we want these projects and this work to succeed, we've got to make sure that we've got the trust that I've had for you over the years, even though we disagree.
Well, I know that my leadership is committed to finding solutions that involve a stable community up here, and that includes the agricultural community. And we put our money where our mouth is, and we've tried to do our best. Have we made some mistakes? Yeah, I don't know. I've made some mistakes. I'm not perfect, but we're trying, and we're continuing to work. So I don't know what people are saying.
No, I don't. But
Maybe I don't want to know.
no, you don't. But I mean, just for you addressing it and being straight like you were, it helps. So they can hear it from the horse's mouth.
Mistakes.
Do you have any, I don't want to say projects in mind, but any examples of what you've done, kind of building on what you're saying, that we could wrap our minds around what you're kind of looking for?
Yeah, I have a slide on that.
That's good.
Yeah.
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 We're chatting.
That's okay. This is over here. I don't have very many slides left, so I'm almost done. Yes.
I think this was a really nice opportunity to let us speak, and I really appreciate that, but I think it's useful to set the tone to these landowner groups that frames who you are beforehand, and you might avoid some of that distraction when you start getting into your presentations. So I think that was maybe part of the intent of the discussion was the landowners specifically in Scott Valley, probably Shasta too, need to know that you're not regulatory, and right up front emphasizing that, and the scope of the work.
I'm glad that Serafina knows about regulatory because I don't even know anything. Like you said, right hand doesn't know the left. I don't know anything about regulatory.
And in my introductory remarks, what I meant to say is we're not doing water here, okay? We're not coming in here and doing water as we're doing habitat and the habitat stuff here. So I know that there are intense discussions going on about water regulation. So I meant to lead with that, I just forgot.
Yeah, okay.
I would just, what a great kickoff. I mean, I believe you that you're here to do water, but my take, but my take on this is that the Army Corps came here and it did its project, and it had undue consequences where this valley drains very well, too well, and the objectives of the Army Corps have changed from making a well-drained tax base area and some flood protection probably to now you're going back to habitat. I think we're generally fine with that. But in the meanwhile, me as a farmer, I'm blamed because of the results of the work that you did. I'm the one that's getting blamed because the river goes dry. And Mike's here because the river goes dry. And so, and it's not proved yet, but I think we're all, in this community, we're all pretty confident that the effects of the Army Corps had a negative result on late season floods in this watershed. And so I'm intrigued and I'm happy you're here because I think you have some responsibility to fix what was done
That's right.
90 years ago.
Yep.
And I'm disappointed that's the only way that happens is that I have to do conservation needs or sell my property, because when you came into our family in 1938, you didn't do that. There wasn't a requirement. You just did it.
Yeah.
And so I would appreciate that you just undid it 90 years later, and I wouldn't have to get into a permanent with your mistake or with the agency's mistake. So I can't get over that piece from one of the first things that you said is that that's a condition of being here. It shouldn't be. It should be a condition of undue consequences. I don't blame you or the agency or anything else. I don't think anybody had an idea that the river would unfold like that.
Yeah.
You know, so there's no like anger there. The only anger is that I have is that I'm getting blamed for it.
And, you know,
I hear you.
in our process, struggling with the economic issues has been like the big hurdle. Honestly, the technical, physical stuff, people know how to do that. But, okay, so what we need for river function is 500 feet. But you carve that off a property that then makes the economic unit not functional. So how do you, and this is I understand traditional conservation easement pricing, but it does not pay for the cost of what is required for ecosystem services. And so this is something we're struggling with and trying to come to terms with before we go out to landowners, is how, you know, the goal is to keep the rural agricultural landscape while providing ecological uplift. How do we do that economically? And that is a key, difficult issue. The technical issues, honestly, you know, there's the models, there's this and that. Those of us who live and work on the river have pretty good darn idea of what needs to be done. It's figuring out how to pencil it out that's problematic, which is why I raised the questions about cost. And, you know, having someone end up owning a corridor down the middle of the river, I'm not sure that's gonna fly super well in the community. So just know that.
But occasional pieces of property do come on the market that would be very suitable for what you want to do. But you can't, like, think about it for 3 years because it won't last that long.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people have big plans and, oh, well, property just sold. Your 3-year grant process doesn't work.
So these are the real issues we're dealing with here.
Yeah, and I guess I don't have a satisfying answer for you, but what I can do is go back to our realty specialists at the Corps and see if there are some other mechanisms that we could try to apply. And maybe ask for some special permissions, but I can't guarantee anything.
Put a writer on a congressional bill you can.
You can ask for that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
And that thing sounds like
Lobby a federal agency to lobby
I know
Congress.
the drill.
you're kind of doing right now, a conservation easement. If you have 400 acres of brush, and it makes it where you can't subdivide the brush, but it's, even though it's not really necessarily a big high conservation value, it's stopping subdividing, but it sounds like you're more into an easement that's really promoting conservation. So right now, if you have a property
that we can modify, we can
Yeah.
come in and grade some floodplain or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, you know, a lot of projects come in and they don't offer anything to landowner. They're like, would you let us do this here? Just because out of the goodness of your heart. And I think there are some positives to offering financial compensation.
Oh, no, I agree.
For an easement, especially since it's only willing. The landowner can just go, no, I don't want to do it. I hear you, Gary. I hear what you're saying, that, you know, there's a responsibility. There, I believe, you said this earlier, that the easement and the property acquisition was congressionally mandated. It's not because they have a policy or whatever. It's part of the law. Am I right on that?
What was, can you repeat that? We were yammering.
Property has to be purchased or has a conservation easement. Is that Army Corps policy or is that congressional law?
That would have to be law, that wouldn't be policy.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, the non-federal sponsor, the LERDs, if you will, is what we call them, lands, easements, relocations, rights of way, and disposals. Those have to be ironclad, and that's generally the responsibility of the project, but the tribe, in essence, would be responsible for the LERDs. But that's all in the calculus as far as how
Yeah, we don't anticipate doing that ourselves. We anticipate partnering up
Right.
to accomplish that. But I don't envision the Yurok tribe ending up as an owner here. I don't anticipate the Yurok tribe owning a bunch of stuff here.
Oh,
No, that's not
But they would-
been our vision.
So then who owns
They would own, because they're correct.
I don't know. It's never been my vision that we would own land or easements here, that we would partner
You would have
up
to
with
find someone to
appropriate-
partner
yeah.
with them. It can't be us.
Yeah,
Yeah, it would be,
and it's not gonna be the feds.
yeah.
So who would be the landowner?
I don't know, you Betsy?
You want to volunteer?
No, thank you.
Watershed
Yeah. Okay, just a couple more slides. You guys know this.
Can we shut the lights off?
I mean, I
Sure.
was being flippant, but what I mean is an appropriate local partner is what
Yeah.
I meant, if I'm being a little more precise with my language.
That's just even a trust or something.
Yeah. So y'all are familiar with this study area. You know it way better than we do. That's why we're here to hear from you. I think we mentioned in the opening that we have this hard boundary at the California-Oregon border because of our congressional authority is just for California streams. So in our first steps of the feasibility study, we are trying to understand current conditions as well as future conditions. And we've been hearing about all the good work that's been going on here. And so we've been reading reports, we've been doing our research, trying to understand what's happening. Because we do want to avoid duplication of efforts or potentially leverage existing or future restoration efforts as well as you all see fit, as whatever you think is appropriate. So I think we started to have some discussions already, and we'll have some more about what plans and projects are going on, what should we know about. And here is just a brief, non-comprehensive list of some things that the Army Corps does under their aquatic ecosystem restoration mission. We can engage in a variety of activities, but some of the fundamental ones are providing for more natural channel conditions, so adding some structure, adding some pools, riffles, backwaters, side channels, restoring floodplain function, by lowering the floodplain, grading, whatever needs to happen. We can do modifications to obstructions to fish passage, so we can build fish ladders or bypasses, whatever the watershed needs. We can remove levees, or we can just set levees back so we have more room for the river to meander. You guys are all the experts here in your watershed. You know what the river needs. This is just to give you a flavor of what we do. So yes, you've already started to tell us, and we appreciate that. What restoration opportunities are important to you? Where are they located? What can we help you with? Is there anything that you need funding for that we could consider in our study? Is there something that you just want us to stay away from? We're interested in that information as well. I think we just have one more slide with Lexi.
Okay, this is our last slide. So we've been talking a lot about a 3-year study timeline, and so that's what Congress wants us to do. So the example is what's on the slide. Unfortunately, again, I apologize for the colors, but it's the same slide that Corey went over about our study approach. And it was brought up today that there's not, of course this isn't representative of the entire community, but this is our first go-ahead at it. So yesterday we had 2 hybrid meetings in Wairika. So people online could call in, and people came to the Wairika location. We were in Happy Camp this morning, and now we're in Etna tonight, but this is just the beginning. We just wanted to, get our presence out there, start building more on our contact list that we have. So if you haven't put your email in and if you feel and you want to, please do so we can keep you updated, so we can start having more of these conversations. But this is just the beginning. We're going to be here for at least the next 3 years, hopefully longer, really hope for longer. But this is just an opportunity to get started. So there's a couple of opportunities for feedback. Mike mentioned a couple at the beginning to meet with us in any capacity. And then we also have emails. So we have a general study email. It's listed at the bottom, Klamath Basin GI at usace.army.mil. But the flyer that you may all have seen includes my contact as well as Dylan's. And just feel free to email us if you want to be added to our contact list. We're still going to be working out the best way to update you all. Maybe it's a newsletter, maybe it's just, if there's a community meeting that you want one of us from the Iraq or the Army Corps to attend, maybe that's a way that we can continue to get information out. But we do have a study website that we're going to be updating as we continue. But as of right now, it's March. With this 3-year study timeline, Corey mentioned that we might need to extend it because we need to do more outreach. We need to make sure that everything that we do has the community's approval, has the input that we need to at least, get things going. We need to work with our federal family to make sure that everything that we do is compliant with their regulations that they oversee. The Endangered Species Act, National Historic Preservation Act. We have to do all of that. So we need to make sure that all of that is good before we even have a draft report to come back to you all formally for a public comment session. But between then and now, the door is open. We really encourage you to contact us, or we can contact you directly to set up these meetings, to keep this conversation going. But we're, with the 3-year study timeline that you see on the screen, we are tentatively potentially trying to get a draft report done by the end of 2025, and hopefully a final report sent up to Congress by 2027. But that's the 3-year timeline that Congress wants us to do. That's what we all intend to do, but if we need to, we can potentially extend that. And that is all I have. Thank you so much for coming tonight. You can probably turn the lights back down. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just, on a question, I mean, I'm sure you guys are well aware, working for the government, and I was working for the county. There's not a lot of trust these days in government, and particularly in this issue, there's not a lot of trust amongst everything. That was one of the toughest things we all had to work on the dams coming out, that being on opposite sides, we still had to develop trust with each other. And so, just as the tribes have to convince this community there isn't something else going on, and we have to convince the people and the tribes and everything we're not a bunch of greedy Neanderthals trying to rape and pillage the land and the trees, So it's pretty tough. But in addressing the trust issue, I think it's absolutely critical that you guys look at our groundwater study first crack out of the box.
Okay.
Before you start on yours. Because once you guys start on yours, it's going to be hard to stop. And if it comes out in a big disagreement with ours or something, all of a sudden the trust is out the window. So if you have troubles or issues with the groundwater study that's been done, point it out ahead of time and say, look, this isn't going to pass muster with us. We're going to have to do something different. So at least we know what the problem might be ahead of time, and scratch our heads about it and maybe come. But if you guys start on this, come out with something, and it's, science tells you things you don't want to hear all the time. I mean, we're clear on that concept. And, but I just think from a trust issue, a trust standpoint, and building on what it's going to take to, work with people and get things going here, I think that would be prudent.
As a Native American, I don't see us on the opposite sides. I feel like that's a misrepresentation.
No, that's a...
I feel like we're on the same side of the same coin. We just have different perspectives about, we all love the land.
Yeah.
And we care about the land. That's what's important to us. And so we're not on opposite sides.
No, I mean, that's the whole deal on the dams. We were on opposite sides on the dams, but we all want the river back. I'm praying for success, you know that. We all are.
Yeah.
So
Now
how
that
much
it's
of
done-
this project will be restoring the Klamath and what happened with the
Time will
sediment?
tell. I don't know exactly where our focus will end up.
But it is a part of this, right?
The upper mid-Klamath, yeah.
It could be.
It could be.
100%.
We had a meeting in Happy Camp today and talked with the Karuk tribe, and they had some ideas about the upper main stem.
To be clear, though, there are still fish in the river. I know I was here last week in a meeting, and some of you all were here, and it was said that the tribes killed all the fish in the river, so it doesn't have anything to do with fish, it's only about water control. And some of you all didn't speak up about that, you know, so there are fish in the river. It was a restoration effort that has been determined to be successful at this point and continues to be. So just to clarify, sometimes science doesn't say things that you're expecting to have, you know, happen. But fortunately, in that case, it did happen.
In terms of process, it seems like you're doing like a literature research now.
Yes, that's right.
So are you going to be posting this project on the website where people can keep track of what you've gathered so we can make
Yeah.
recommendations? And, you know, what does that process look like?
You're not the first person to make that comment. So yes, we are gonna develop a list of what we have already, and we'll put it on our website, the study website. And so you can take a look at it and make sure that what you think is important is there, and if it's not, you let us know. Yeah.
So you currently have funding for the feasibility.
That's right.
Do you need additional funding for the design?
Yes.
And is the funding for the design and implementation in one chunk or two steps?
I've seen it both ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, speaking of your federal partners, there's some big old USGS study going on. How does that process intersect with yours process, another big federal study?
I'm not familiar with that one, I guess.
But we have spoken with USGS, and they have participated in these meetings and in a meeting that we had in January as well. So we're working with them, and
Because they're doing a lot of model development and,
I'm sure our engineers who aren't able to be here today would be able to speak a lot more to that.
The natural flow study?
but yeah.
That's reclamation, not USGS.
Oh,
So
okay,
that's why I was confused.
reclamation.
I was like, they are? What are they doing?
Oh, sorry, wrong agency.
They are trying to reconstruct the unimpaired natural flow of the Klamath from the headwaters to the mouth in that study,
Okay.
using a very comprehensive GIS-based approach.
Right.
So that's not directly part of this study.
Well, just, I'm sure Mike, you know, you guys may know, but the RCD has lots of data, as I'm sure Harold, you guys do at QBIR. So, I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
data and stuff.
But you're going to be taking that data in this feasibility period? Using
The
it?
data that we need to model, yes. Yes.
So I can just speak from the council's perspective, which I don't think we have as much as you guys have, and may not have as much as you guys have, but we are feeding data to the Europe project down the tailings, and it's a significant amount of time for us. So is there compensation for, like, if you want off Sarah's temperature and your flow data? I mean, how is that?
I think you would have to be in a formal agreement with us. Does that sound right, Serafina? Yeah, we could only compensate a partner who is already in a formal agreement with us.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you probably know this, but nonprofits we're in uncertain territories with our own funding sources. I mean, we obviously feel like the data that we collect is publicly funded and would want to contribute, but it's not an insignificant lift to QA/QC your data and get it into a process or a place that you can share it. And I can just tell you, if you called me tomorrow and wanted all our data for the Scott, you're not gonna get it. we just don't have the resources.
Yeah, so Sharna, I think this is something where we could work with you to see what we can do to help you out. Because we know, like you have, it's not just a little bit of data, it's a lot, and it is a lot of work to do it. So I think we could talk about the Yurok tribe entering into like a contractual arrangement or a stipend or something like that to help you out, because I don't think it's just an ordinary request. I think it's the amount that you have is pretty extraordinary.
Well, and you got Forest Service, so this,
We're not paying the Forest Service to do that.
we're already doing this for a project that we're working on. And I have only so much staff. I appreciate the offer. But if we're sharing our data to do a duplicate study, I don't know how much motivation that we were gonna have, just to be honest.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
So a strategy would be to utilize people that are already doing that within your framework as a way to, and compensate them somehow.
I think using
Our process.
the harder model would be step number one. I absolutely think that duplicating that will not go well with our community.
I agree, Sharna.
And we're already well down the way of doing the hydraulic modeling on a lot of these areas, so yeah, I think, there's just a lot of integration into this process that I think, we just have to, there's a lot there, and it's not insignificant, and we're all scrambling with just the workload that we have today. So this is not.
Don't blame me.
I'm looking at you. So yeah, it's a lot. I'm just gonna go back. That whole thing about the ownership and the conservation thing. Honestly, and I don't want to speak for you, Lynn, or you, Carl, but it seems to me that that would be the first cut for the SCOT anyways, is to ask those. I mean, I just sent out letters this last month from just SVID down, and it was only 34, 35 people that had any association physically with the river. It wasn't a huge amount of people. Mm-hmm. And then you could take probably, 20 upstream from that, but I don't know if you guys would be willing. I mean, that to me is like if that's a hard no for the SCOT, which you guys are the only ones that really have that authority, it seems like they should have the first say, and then if our community came together and said, we would do this, given those two alternatives, then I'll just say from the council's perspective, we're all in. We will be all 100% in, but if we don't have them, I don't think you have us.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. Yeah.
Speaking of coming from opposite sides, like I said, I'm from the Southern Oregon Land Conservancy, so we work on the top of that flat line you drew.
Sorry.
Well, but I hear because I really like it down here. And Dylan let me know the meeting was coming up, and that we just came into some land in the Cottonwood Creek drainage, which flows, I think, into the upper middle Klamath that you're talking about. So in as much as we can help across the line, or we can convince whoever has to decide that Cottonwood or other creeks coming down off the hill in Oregon into the Klamath in that region are worth it. I look down the hill, I can't see the border, but it's there.
Right.
But if there's a way that we can help, we're not far. We're working in that area. It's a priority zone for our conservation plan. So, in as much as that, a river that flows into the river into California is California enough.
It's tough, yeah.
There's hard lines and then there's softer ones.
Right. I think we would be violating Congress's authorization.
Well, I'm okay with that.
So.
Congress doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's an issue that we're gonna have to resolve. Then the other one that I think is pretty early is that you look at our existing data and see if it fits within your constraints as palatable or not. And so those are the first two hurdles. If we trip over either one of those, then we've got a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, that's fair. I wish we had our engineers here to talk data. Yeah.
And, you know, on the Scott, the main stem may be a little more challenging, but I think the tributaries are very important
Yeah.
and something that you might shift focus on eventually.
Yeah. We've seen some
Yeah.
reports on the tributaries.
Our report.
Your report? Yep, we're looking at it.
And the land has to be is private, not public.
It's actually better if it's private. We're not supposed to step on a mission of another federal agency. But we can also sometimes get special permission to restore. We have to enter like an MOU with the Forest Service or whoever it is, or MOA, yeah.
I think the forest supervisor came to the meeting in Wairika, Chris Christopherson himself.
So do you have to go through the full tilt CEQA boogie where you've got to do a full range of alternatives?
Yes.
Oh, good.
I know it's gonna be hard.
Oh,
Our
good
job is
Lord.
gonna be hard, yeah.
It's what they do though, Rick.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's what they do.
It's
They
what
have
we
a
do.
team that does that.
Yeah, no, I know, but
And it's one of the, I think it's one of the extreme benefits of this, is that they're like, we're willing to take on the environmental permitting, and that's a significant
oh,
cost.
absolutely it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just feel sorry for you.